Right in.
Let's go.
All right. So, welcome everyone. Nick Wagner Sr. It's Monday night. It's typically Sunday, Matt, but we moved it to Monday because of Mother's Day. I had to respect all the moms. So, it's another episode of the Full Potential Podcast. I'm thrilled to be with Matt McCooe of Connecticut Innovations tonight. And we're going to have a really, I think, great discussion, Matt. I said before all the audience joined that I've been following your work for a while at Connecticut Innovations as a Connecticut guy. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about your whole career journey. So welcome to the show, and I appreciate you making time with your busy schedule.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate being here. It's great to be here.
Well,
Looking
it's
forward
going
to
to be
it.
fun. And I mentioned you, we have a lot of early career professionals that listen to this podcast. And I love being able to share inspirational career journeys like yours, Matt, with my audience. So people coming out of school can realize what could be, right? So what they could do. There's not one right or wrong path. You've done a lot of different things, and now you're running a venture capital firm, which I'm sure you probably didn't think that's what you were going to do when you were growing up. So we're going to talk about all that. But I
Yeah.
always ask the question, Matt, just to kind of introduce yourself. When you meet someone and they ask you, who is Matt? How do you answer that question? Like, what's your answer to that?
Yeah. Boy, I think that's the hardest question I'm going to ask all night, Nick. Um, so I guess I go back to the beginning, right? I'm Bobby and Jack McCooey's sixth son, sixth kid. I'm from a big Irish Catholic family from Ridgewood, New Jersey. Um, I got my first pair of clothes that were bought for me in eighth grade, literally.
Wow.
Before that, everything was hand me downs all along my journey. Um, and yeah, I went to Boston College. I think that kind of helped define me as well. Um, but yeah, I think if you sort of boil all those pieces down, you sort of get to the raw meat of who I am.
So you come from a big family, as you
Yeah.
mentioned. So that I'm sure influenced how you grew up. And I love how you start with your parents, and I know family's important to you. So clearly you got that sense that sense of family from your upbringing. But let's talk about when you were a little Matt, right? Like all the way back in New Jersey. Like I mentioned, I'm going to guess running a venture capital firm was probably not what you dreamed of doing when you were a little kid, because who even knows what a venture capital firm is when you're a little kid?
Didn't
So
even exist. Yeah.
what was your big dream as a kid, Matt, of what you wanted to do when you grew up?
Man, like everybody else, I'm wearing a Boston Red Sox hat here. I wanted to play second base for the Sox, or play, point guard for the Celtics. I was a scrappy. I was out of the house at 8 a.m. and I got home at 8 p.m. My knees were scraped and my elbows were torn up because I'd been biking or cycling or playing hoops or football, whatever was on, I was a part of it and playing. Um, and so I just always wanted to be like active and being involved in sports and playing with my friends and doing stuff that I loved. Um, and I think that's actually still pretty much true for me. As I fast forward, that's still what I still want to be like running around with my friends, doing interesting work and having fun and scraping up my knees, getting into tussles if I need to, and trying to win. Like not that much has changed, funnily enough.
That's an interesting comparison. I like the I can sense the competitive nature. So let's talk about, obviously family was big for you. You had a lot of siblings. You was the plan from you, Matt, to always go to college? Was that, I mean, was it from when, as long as you can remember, your parents were like, Matt, you're going to college? Or was that something that you decided on your own you wanted to do and made happen? Because it's different for every family, and I always find this discussion interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw David Salinas was on your podcast earlier. I'm sure he would have had a very different
Yes, he had a
answer.
very interesting answer for me.
I know he's got strong feelings about higher education. My mom is hard to the right, in terms of the importance of education. Both she and my dad. Um, my dad's parents came over on the boat from Ireland, and he was the first generation. Managed to scrape his way through college. There's a great story about him. He was at Fordham University and was working full time. Paying for helping cover his mom's costs, helping his younger brother get into college, and he went to the head of the college at the time, and he said, Father, I hate to tell you, but I've got to drop out. Um, I can't make my tuition payments, and I need to be home when and 40 hours a week isn't cutting it. I need to make more money, and I can't do school and pay tuition and work. And the father said, Jack, if you come back in here again, I'm going to kick your ass. Go back to school, get back in the classroom. And so Fordham basically covered his college for the next 2 years, and that was a game changer for him. The school kept him in there, and it got him his degree, and that made all the difference for him. Um, my mother came from a very family where education was prized. Her great grandfather, I guess, was off the boat. Grandparents off the boat. But her parents were, and her aunts and uncles were all scholars, PhDs and lawyers, and she had a master's degree from Yale back when that wasn't so common. And so, yeah, I would say from the very get go, it was understood, all of us, we're all going to go to college. That wasn't a question. And even if my parents didn't have any money, which we didn't, that was the one thing they were going to find a way to make sure we were all able to get through high school and college.
Yeah, I mean that's a great story, and I mean again, I think it depends on what how your parents influence you that decision for a lot of people, and it's obviously you mentioned BC, which is a great school. What made you choose Boston College, and how did you decide what you wanted to do for a degree? I mean, did you have a sense going into it what you wanted to do, or was that a journey as well, trying to figure that out?
Yeah, so there was definitely a real appreciation for liberal arts degrees and learning for learning's sake, and pursuit of knowledge and following one's curiosity. And that was sort of the goal for all of us. That was what we were taught was the most important thing about it in education. Wasn't getting a vocational technical degree, although I think those are fantastic as well. Um, but it was the that pursuit of learning. Um, and BC was the best. BC, I was lucky to get into BC, and it was a lot easier to get into then than it is now. I scraped and was really lucky to get in there. The best school I got into, and it was the best place I could have ended up. I was much happier there than I would have been any place else. It turned out to be a really propitious and fortuitous place for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think a lot like look, let's be honest, right? When you pick where you're going to go to school, like, we're kids, right? I mean, I didn't when I decided to go to UConn, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think it's a lot of students going into college don't know what they want to do. So you ended up going to Boston College. As you went through that, did it become more clear to you what you wanted to do when you were done? Did you have like a great teacher that helped you figure that out? Was there an internship you had? Like, how did you figure out? Because you had a job, I was obviously check you out on LinkedIn before this. You had a job right out of school. Is where you really started your journey. So how did you figure out what you wanted to do?
Yeah, so I'm sure you knew kids at UConn who were doing this. I was the one who was making T-shirts, and you know, illegal as hell. I was stealing trademarks left and right. Um, but I was making T-shirts and knocking on doors for the freshmen, selling them to the parents when they're coming onto campus. So me and my friends and I, we always had a hustle. We're always, figuring out how to make a buck, and it was just basically cover. It was basically beer money, right? It wasn't,
Right.
wasn't covering tuition like my father had to do. But yeah, so I think even then I was interested in entrepreneurship, and we didn't call it that. We just called it, finding interesting and fun ways to make money with my friends. And so yeah, I got started doing that, and I always had, I was lucky. I got good jobs. My father was an executive recruiter, and so he was a master networker, truly one of the great networkers I've met. Um, and so he even helped me get into BC, but he helped me get jobs. He helped me sort of get some footing. But in terms of the education that I got at BC, um, I got very caught up in the Jesuit mission, which is, become a man for others. This idea of service and um, creating a more socially just world. And my senior year, I was moving pretty far away from the consumer stuff and like making money just for money's sake, and moving pretty hard in the other direction where I was sort of anti-consumer society and that hedonic cycle, which we can talk more about if you want. Um, but I learned a lot about social justice and our society and how it's structured and how it's meant to sort of turn us all into consumers and have us keep buying and buying more stuff. And I knew I didn't want to. I think I figured out then that it was all. It felt all to me like a trap, and I didn't want to fall into it. And so, like my senior year, instead of going with my friends to Jamaica, I went to Maine, and I worked building houses in Maine. Um, and my first job out of college, I was doing volunteer work, helping refugees from Central America get legal status, people who were fleeing the wars in Guatemala and El Salvador. I spent a full year doing volunteer work with the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. Um, so not to say that I was also living in Nantucket and bartending, and I was doing interesting, fun stuff. I sort of never lost my sense of like joy, but I also felt like um, at Boston College, I caught this bug for um, being changed, but not so much being changed by the world, but trying to make a change in the world.
Yeah, and that I think if you look at what you've done throughout your career, I think you've embraced that with a lot of different roles, including the one that you're in now. Because I think with Connecticut Innovations, you're absolutely working with companies that I think are doing a lot of positive things for the world. So I definitely see the foundation of that. I want to talk about a couple jobs. We're not going to go through your whole history, but a couple jobs that jumped out at me that I thought would be really interesting to chat about. You did some work in New York City, but then you went to Mexico. So you actually took a role outside the U.S. And I would love to hear your thoughts on why did you take a role outside the U.S. Like, what did you learn? Like, share a little bit about that role, because not everyone has an opportunity to go work in other countries.
Yeah, sure. So for one thing, I did study in Madrid my junior year, so I got some fundamentals in Spanish. Um, that first job out of college, I was working. I was speaking Spanish all the time, um, and I applied for something called the Rotary Club, which is, my mom was a Fulbright scholar, Rotary scholars. It's sort of like a poor man's Rotary scholar. I apologize to any Rotarians who might be listening. Um, and it was an opportunity to go study anywhere in the world. They basically said, go someplace, get a degree, live with a family, be an ambassador, represent the Rotarians. Um, and so I chose Mexico because at the time I was working for MCI, and MCI was huge. You probably haven't even heard of it, but it was a huge telecommunications company. It was like it
Yeah.
was the competitor to AT&T. They basically broke up AT&T literally when it was just a monopoly. And it was the fastest growing services company in the world. And I knew they were going to Mexico. I knew I wanted to work there. Um, and Mexico is also going through a telecommunications, opening. So it was going to open up to competition for the first time, which is really interesting. It's a little like being in Berlin after the wall came down, or Russia when it opened up to capitalism. And so Mexico was going through that in 1994. And so I was able to go down there, get a degree in marketing, live with the Mexican family, learn Spanish. It was an incredible experience. Really went native. Didn't know anybody who was American. Didn't want to know anybody who spoke English. I really sort of fully embraced the experience. I got to know the people who I thought and think are some of the most lovely people on the planet. Um, and then when MCI came, I had already done a year of work for Beck and Dickinson, which is a big Fortune 500 company where my dad helped me get that job. Um, and MCI came, and I was the first American they hired because I was
Oh,
there.
wow.
I basically front ran them by 18 months. So when they got there, they couldn't afford not to hire me because I knew all the products. I was a top salesman for them in the country, and I spoke the language, and I knew marketing at that point. And so I was basically like my path into product management and marketing, which is what I wanted to do for MCI. So I basically
That's
did an end
that
run
that's so
on them.
cool. And what, because I think a lot of young early career professionals dream about doing what you did, and leaving their home country, going to work somewhere else. It sounds like you feel it was a great experience, but and any advice for people when they're trying to figure out if that's a good idea for them?
Yeah, so I guess two things. One is back in my day, you were told you had to go, if you're going to get a job, you have to go stay 5, 10 years. Like you're not allowed to leave. Like you have to go and you have to stay. You have to, if people think that you're a job hopper, you'll never get hired. And I think, basic and my dad was a recruiter, so he was very much a believer in that model and that mantra. Um, but I never thought it was true. I was much more like the millennials, like your generation and younger, where people sort of work for a year or two, they learn what they need to learn, and then they go on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And suddenly, after 5, 10 years, they've got this, you know, arsenal of weapons that they've built up by working in all these different places, learning all these different skills. And I do think, we're in a global world, and understanding how business works in other countries is vitally important. At least I thought it was important for me at the time. Learning to speak in other languages and learning other cultures and how business gets done elsewhere was incredibly valuable. And I'll say this too, Nick, it is about as much fun as I've ever had professionally, was just being an expat in a foreign country. I found a pack after I sort of went from, just living with my Mexican family when I was in school to living with a bunch of Americans and French and people from all over the world. And there was just like a rat pack of us. There were like 30 of us, and we went around the country and we traveled every weekend and we played, and we had lake house and we had beach houses. It was so much fun. Um, and it was because we were all, living abroad, living the dream. And I think
Yeah.
anybody can do it. I think anybody can go, if you have a skill you've picked up in America, and you've got some rudimentary language skills, and you're thinking about, you know, pack up your bags, apply for a scholarship fund, or if not, contact your embassy, or just move. Pick up, find everybody knows somebody, and go to a foreign country and go get a job, because people want to hire Americans. Um, and you'll eventually, if you commit to it, you're going to meet some amazing people and get some fantastic work experience.
Yeah,
So I'm
and I
so
mean,
glad I did it.
and I think that's great advice. And I think for a lot of people early on in their career, when they maybe don't have a family or a mortgage, it's a great time to do it because you just have less to tie you down to where you are. So I think that's fantastic advice. I want to talk about how you ended up. So you're doing marketing, you're doing sales, which is, you mentioned you wanted to do, and then you did a big pivot in like the early 2000s. It looks like when you ended up going to work for Columbia.
Yeah,
So the college, so Columbia University.
yeah.
So explain, and you mentioned, and I want to hear if how networking played into this, because you mentioned your father was this amazing networker, and I'm sure he taught you a few things. So how did you end up going from the telecom industry to Columbia University?
Yeah. So funny, my kids were just asking me that at dinner tonight. They're like, "How did you get into Columbia University?" It doesn't make any sense because I went to business school there, so
Right.
I did get my MBA, and when I was in business school, I worked on a business plan with one of my college friends who was with me at MCI, and we started a company. It was 1999. I graduated that May of '99. We worked on the business plan all that final semester. Um, Glenn Hubbard, who became the dean, he was Bush's economic advisor. He was an investor. He was like in the kitchen with the pizzas and with us as we were putting the plan together. Um, and Yeah, that kitchen table business plan, we raised 20 million bucks and ended up raising $100 million, and um, hit 100 million in sales, and had a big exit. Um, but it was also the time of the telecommunications crash. So the telecom world went like that, and then it went down like that. Um, and when I was at Columbia, my brother had introduced me to some people in the technology transfer office, and they had recruited me at the time to stay. I did some interning there when I was in school, um, and so I got to know some of them during that experience. And they wanted me to work under somebody who I didn't want to work under, and they called, or I reached out to them through my brother, I think, and he's also a great networker. Um, and had an interview, and they said, we want you to come back. And And so I ended up, I only wanted to stay 3 years. I stayed 5. It was incredibly fun. And I managed the university's early stage venture investments into the university research. So I would find a researcher who was working on a cure for Alzheimer's or a cure for memory loss or cancer or a software package, and we would give them, $50,000, $100,000 to advance their work far enough along that a VC could come in and invest. And I would work with the VCs that pull the business plan together. So basically taking all the sales and marketing and business plan stuff that I'd done, and being founder of a couple companies, I was able to bring those to Columbia and help their faculty members launch a bunch of companies out of the university. It was
So
great fun.
I was hoping that you would tell that story because I wanted you to tie you moving to Columbia back with the company and that you started, that you co-founded. Um, so I appreciate you sharing that. And you kind of casually just talked about how you led a company from zero to $28 million in revenue. Um, but what a ride that must have been at that point in time, right? So many people in my audience don't remember, obviously, 99, 2000, 2001 with this whole internet boom and the year Y2K and everything that went on with the technology industry then. But you obviously had a lot of passion and knowledge about the telecom industry. A lot of people don't do what you did, Matt, which was go start a company from nothing, right? Raise capital, bring it to a point where you exit the company successfully. What was that 2 years like? Because I can't even imagine like the ride that must have been from when you started that to when you exited.
Yeah, so I should say I exited before the company had their sale. It sold a couple of years later.
Got it.
But yeah, man, we went from, three of us at a kitchen table. We had 300 people a year later, or 18 months later. We had 300 people. We were in 5 different cities. I had 8 of my Columbia Business School classmates who were working with me. Um, it was insane. I met my wife at an internet conference, and we were, she was one of the 5 women at this conference with 150 dudes. Um, but I met my wife at because there were internet conferences every night. There was a party, um, and it was wild. I mean, the bankers were throwing money at us. We were raising money as quickly as we wanted to. We were doing mergers. Um, One quick story I'll tell you is that as the telecommunications market was crumbling, um, we 2 of the people from Columbia with me who joined us were ex-bankers, and so we were going around to there were like 6 or 7 companies in our market space. We were going into buildings, and we were basically in the riser. We were providing like broadband internet, and then we would sell applications and high speed bandwidth into all the tenants in the buildings. And they had to like do deals with the real estate people and put the infrastructure in. It was pretty complicated, and it was very clear in 2001 that none of these companies were going to make it because there was a massive amount of venture capital that came in, and then all the VCs pulled back. Everybody was out, and so these 2 MBAs and the guy who one of the other guys was a really smart Wharton guy. They were going around to all of our competitors and their board, being like, "Look, we know you've only got $3-4 million left. You've got all this infrastructure. The writing's on the wall. You're definitely going bankrupt. If it's not tomorrow, you're bankrupt in like 60 days. We're gonna be the last guy standing. Merge with us, and we'll take your cash. We'll give you that value in the equity of this company that's going to be, it's going to emerge a winner in the space." What they didn't, and every time they said yes, what they didn't know is that $3 to $4 million was what was going to keep us afloat for the next 6 to 12 weeks for us to do the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. And so there was a lot of serendipity in surviving that, and a lot of smart people who were able, and great deal makers who were able to allow us to get through that. So I saw the huge hype, the Gartner hype cycle, the huge ride up, and then the huge sort of unbelievable slough into the trough of disillusionment, and all the way
Yeah.
up the other side where the market sort of found its equilibrium. It was a great experience, very fun, and quite instructional for everything I've done since.
Well, yeah, yeah, and I mean, I feel that the work you did at Columbia was really probably a huge inspiration for you and what you do at Connecticut Innovations today. Because I think
Yeah,
what you talked about, obviously, it's not exactly the same thing, but there's definitely some similarities between what you did at Columbia, and what you do today. And I want to pause for a second because I think a lot of my guests probably might not know, like, what is a venture capital firm? Like, can you explain in the most, basic terms, what does that mean? What is venture capital?
sure. So we provide the highest risk and highest reward capital in the system, in the economic system. So we're the VCs. We're the ones who will put, um, we'll give Sergey and Larry, we'll give them the first 5 million bucks back when they were the 23rd search engine coming out of Stanford, right? So it's a crazy bet that Kleiner Perkins made. But we do crazy things. We find people we like and we believe in, and we get behind their business plans. We give them some capital to get started, and use our networks to open up doors and find additional dollars to come and invest behind them and help them recruit, help the entrepreneurs. A lot of them are first time entrepreneurs. Help them understand best practices and stay out of trouble, and hopefully find their way to great success. And so I think it's a pretty noble calling. It's also, in my opinion, it's the most fun job you could possibly have.
And when you, again, like, I don't think back when you were doing telecom in Mexico or even starting your own business, it didn't sound like you had the sense that you were going to run a venture capital firm at one point. But as you went through that process, working for yourself with your startup, and actually raising capital yourself, did you get a sense that, wow, maybe I want to do this one day and this is really interesting? Or how did you figure that out? Because I feel like that's, being an entrepreneur and then running a venture capital firm are obviously two very different things.
Yeah, so I definitely knew by the time I was 24 or so, or 25, that I was going to be a venture capitalist.
Interesting. Okay.
So in the same way that I sort of end ran MCI, like I was like, there's no way they're going to give me a marketing job in Mexico. I got to get down there before they get there. Um, I also did, something similar. Um, you know, before business school, I did a 4 month internship for a trust company of the West, which was an emerging markets private equity firm, which is, just basically later stage venture capital, but still investing in private companies. Um, and I did that because I went to a library and I put together a whole book on venture capital and private equity. I pulled together 50 most up-to-date articles from Harvard Business Review and the Stanford Business Journal, and I pulled this whole document, this dossier together for them because they didn't have it on the subject matter. And I went to them and they gave me a job, and so even then I knew that was the path that I was on,
Well,
Nick.
that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I was very committed to, and the Columbia thing sort of was putting me on that path. I knew I wanted to um, pursue this. It's a hard job to get, but I knew it was one I wanted to
No,
be in.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think the reality, right, is there's uh, not a huge amount of venture capital firms compared to like a lot of other jobs out there, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, it's not like there's, you know, a venture capital firm on every corner of the street. So, with Connecticut
especially back then.
Innovations, huh? Yeah,
Especially
especially
back
back
then.
then. With Connecticut Innovations, which is the premier venture capital firm in Connecticut, how did you end up there, right? So I want to ask that question. How did you end up at Connecticut Innovations? And I know you didn't. I don't believe you. Obviously, you didn't go there as the CEO. So how did that kind of that evolution happen for you? And I want to hear every story you've told so far is about your network, right? So I know that's probably a part of it, but I want to hear about how that happened.
Yeah, sure. So you're right about that. Uh, so they actually had a recruiting firm. So Russell Reynolds was leading the search. My wife, who's also an entrepreneur, heard about the job and she told me about it, but she's like, do not apply. And I hadn't applied for a job in 10 years. I was like, no, it
Yeah.
sounds really interesting. I have a chance to go and make an impact. And she's like, but it's up in Hartford, and your whole network is in New York. And and then I went in and really liked the people I met with. Mike Cantor and Catherine Smith were sort of chair and vice chair. I love them. Then they brought me in like 2 days later to meet with Dan Malloy, who was the governor at the time. And I sat down with Dan, and he looked at my resume, and I've been doing venture capital for 15 years. I had a couple of successful startups. My resume said, so Matt, why do you want to work here? I said, stop. Do you want to work here? Why would you? What are you thinking? And I was like, Governor, it'd be a great honor and a pleasure to do this. And so so they brought me in to help run the place. I think they thought that he and Catherine Smith were investing a lot of money into venture capital in the state. They thought it was going to be an important lever to help emerging companies grow, and they were just looking for somebody with some like experience running other venture capital firms. And so I was lucky enough to get it. I was lucky enough that I made the call to join. It wasn't obvious at the time, but I'm so glad I did it.
I love how you hadn't applied for a job in so long and you applied for this one. So I would love for you to share with my audience. So obviously, Connecticut Innovations invests in you said early stage startups to help them grow here in the state of Connecticut. But what can you share some of the success stories of companies that you've invested in that you're really personally proud of that have made an impact? Because I know that for you, this isn't, to your point earlier, it's not just about making money. You really love the impact, the social impact for good that you get to make. So any success stories you want to share?
Boy, my God, there's so many. We have 225 companies, and so I don't want to pick and choose favorites. But we love them all, just different in different ways. But in the last, do you know what a unicorn? I don't know if everybody knows what a unicorn is, but it's $1 billion
If you
plus.
could explain it, that would be great.
Yeah, so if a company has $1 billion plus valuation, they're called a unicorn because at least it used to be incredibly rare, like a unicorn in the forest. That a company would be valued at $1 billion. And for the last 5 years, Connecticut Innovations has had one unicorn per year. The state of Connecticut has had like 7 or 8, which is more than most countries on the planet during the same time period. It's incredibly impressive. And some of them, like Arvinas, they're working on cures for prostate cancer, and we have other companies that are more prosaic. They're doing event conference software. Another company, Greenworks Lending, that just sold for a great multiple. They're doing financing for solar installations are all around the country with using government programming to figure out how to do low cost installs so people can put solar up who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it. We have companies in the travel industry, that survived the travel debacle over the last year and a half, and they're emerging incredibly well in this time. We've got companies that are modernizing the grid, and we have medical device companies that are changing the way we're doing surgery. One company, one story I love is Andre Swanston, who is also a UConn grad, went to Holderness, which is a fabulous private school here in Connecticut. And he came from the Bronx, grew up in the Bronx. His parents were very into education. I think his mom was a teacher. But scholarship kid who at Holderness and at UConn. And he just sold his company for over $100 million. And he sold it. It's an ad tech company in Stanford. And it's created this multi-generational wealth. So there's a lot of people also who've gone from from nothing. We have one entrepreneur here who, his dad was a unemployed police officer in Lagos, Nigeria, or outside Nigeria, who made it to America, got married, went through, got his MBA at University of New Haven, and has started 3 companies worth $1 billion or more. I mean, there's so many, incredibly inspiring people in the state who, you know, I'm in awe of for what they've built. And just watch that we've got another, this year we'll have another $1 billion company. I hope. It's an exciting time of venture capital, and it's a great time in Connecticut. We're having a lot of success.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can sense the joy in the way you speak about how proud you are of these companies and being a part of it. So I appreciate that. I have one more question about your career in Connecticut Innovations, and I always close with the same question. When you look back at your career, you mentioned networking multiple times, Matt. For everyone out there, why is networking so important in your view? And do you have any tips for people on like how do you become better at it? Right? You mentioned you learned a lot from your father, but can you become better at it in your opinion? What's your thought on that?
Yeah. So I was thinking a lot about this coming into this discussion, um, because a conversation I had at the dinner table tonight with my kids. So I would say just about every job that I've ever had, almost, not with a few exceptions, um, I knew somebody who was able to connect me to somebody. And I'm not saying that I got the job because nobody sort of put their hand on the scale and said you have to hire this person, maybe once or twice, but for the most part, I got the interview. Um, and you can be a great networker. You can come off the boat from Nigeria and become an extraordinary network. This guy Ani Chukwu, he's had the Clintons at his house. He's hosted a fundraiser for the Clintons. And in my opinion, there's a couple of things that people just have to do. They have to be very open. They have to be relaxed about it. They have to put themselves into situations that make them uncomfortable. Go to things where you might feel awkward. Um, have a few good stories that you can tell, so people feel like you're able to sort of carry the conversation when you need to, and also drop breadcrumbs. So when you're talking to people, um, the story I started off with about how I grew up, there's a lot of breadcrumbs in there, right? So there's a lot of things that people could pick up on where they can relate to me
Right.
because, oh, I know somebody from New Jersey. Oh, I knew somebody from BC. Or somebody's Irish Catholic. Or I knew somebody. I was poor to middle class growing up. Like there's so many things there where it's very easy to find a connection to keep the conversation going. And I think that connection and the sense of relatedness is what allows people to want to sort of help and work with each other. And so I basically spend all my time now, Nick, connecting VCs to our companies and our companies to customers and talent. So I basically all I do all day long is expand my network and meet more and more people and put everybody sort of into a room together, a virtual room, as like we're in now. Um, but I really believe that anybody can do it. Um, it's a universal gift that people give each other. People, I think, want to help each other, and we just have to make it so people can relate to us and that they want to help us, and they will. I'm this is going to sound mystical, but I don't mean it to. But I think when you sort of speak to the universe listens, and it brings back to you what very often what you're seeking. Um, and I think people just need to sort of speak to the universe and tell that let people know what they want, and making a declaration about it, like having a vision of where they want to be, um, and being able to articulate it. That's really important to yourself, for yourself, and certainly for myself. Um, and I think it sort of launches a lot of journeys.
No, I think that's well said. And the point about you, your role as a venture capital firm, not only are you providing capital in the form of dollars, right? Money and assets, but what you said, I think, is almost as important, if not more important, is the coaching and guidance and the networking you're providing that company, in addition to the money, it's probably almost priceless, Matt. Honestly, with the way you described it. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I love the I love the breadcrumbs. I'm going to use that. I don't worry, I will credit you. I really enjoy that. So I always close the same question, Matt. I know you mentioned you having dinner with your family earlier. Thank you for making time out of your family, running Connecticut Innovations to share your journey, because I think it's a
It's my pleasure,
fascinating
Nick.
journey. So I was really
My
happy to
pleasure.
have you on. But I always close the same question. What is the one piece of advice that you would give my listeners that's helped you reach your full potential? So you've been successful in the telecom industry, doing sales, starting your own business, now in venture capital. What is that one thing that you would share that's helped you be so successful?
Yeah. Two things. I think your first couple of jobs need to be work. It needs to be hard. Like you need to go and push yourself. Get into some. If you're an engineer, go get the hardest job at the toughest place. If you want to do sales and marketing, go work for the number one sales and marketing firm. Get into sales, grind it out with the best possible people you can, because those are the people you're going to learn from. Those are the basic skills and tools that that you'll need later in life. I think it's really important to have two or three things that you're exceptional at, or that you at least believe that you're truly good at. Um, and then if you do that, I feel like I haven't worked for the last 20 years. Like everything I've done, Nick, has been play for me. Right? I don't, I obviously, like everybody else, I have bad days, and I've got, you know, disappointing outcomes and hard conversations with people that I don't want to have. But um, for the most part, I've been able to do what I love. And I think if you do what you love, and it sounds like a crappy, you know, speech at a graduation, but um, finding something that you really enjoy doing allows you to excel. I think it's good for your blood pressure. It's good for your mental health, your physical health. It's good for your family, and the people say you never work another day in your life if you find something you love, um, and I think that's true. But for the young people on the call, it is incredibly important that you grind it out. And if everybody around you is it's also cliche, but if your boss is getting in at 7, get in there at 6:59. If your boss is leaving at 7, leave at 7:02. Put the extra effort in, and it pays dividends for a whole career. It's like 2, 3, 4, 5 years of grinding, and you'll get a 50-year dividend from that.
And when you're in your early 20s, you have unlimited energy anyway. So right.
And you can
So
do that, right? You can
yeah,
still
you can
you can
do
still
that.
party until 4 in the morning and get up at 6 and go hard. I can't do that now. I can't do that for. I would need 2 weeks to recover. I would think, but
Especially with the family, right? But no, I
yeah,
think great advice, Matt. I appreciate you making time. Fantastic conversation. We're gonna link in the show description, Matt, to your LinkedIn if anyone wants to get in touch with you. We'll also link to the Connecticut Innovations website. So if we have any entrepreneurs listening that might be interested in Connecticut Innovations, they can contact you